Well, if a lot of people were looking forward to a sense of relief Tuesday night with the campaign season finally coming to a close, then, well, about half of us may be more stressed than ever about the future of our country and our region, with the other half excited for the policy possibilities that could come with their party seemingly in complete control. So what's next? What can we expect from the unprecedented? Helping us focus on what the election means here locally, in the studio with us tonight, Joe Mannies, political reporter from St. Louis Public Radio. Andy Theising, chair of the political science department at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, and Ken Warren, professor of political science at St. Louis University. The political tide has shifted, and whether you feel like you're riding the wave or about to drown, we'll try to make sense of what it all means. So stay tuned. Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. On November 8th, Republicans won, and in Missouri, won big. Multiple races with massive margins. In the Show Me State, Republicans now control both chambers of the legislature and the governor's mansion. But how will they govern with all of that consolidated power? Like President-elect Trump, Missouri's Governor-elect Greitens ran as an outsider, even to his own party at times. Are there still bridges to build in Jeff City within the party? Voters demanded change Tuesday night. So what changes can we expect? What's next for the region and the country? Okay, so I want to stay local, but we have to talk Trump, I think, because that had an effect statewide. Yes. Right. So I guess quickly, did you see it? Did you see it coming? Did you see it coming?
Yeah, I saw it coming, but not by the margin. I'm not sure anybody saw the margin. I mean, Trump. He got 100,000 more votes than Mitt Romney did
here in Missouri
4 years ago. But Hillary Clinton got 170,000 votes less than Barack Obama had gotten. So their margin ended up being about 20 points. And that huge Trump train just flattened all the statewide Democrats in his path.
Have you seen a 20-point victory for president in Missouri?
No, I cannot recall that. No, ever.
Did you see it coming?
I did not see it coming. I thought that Democrats would be really motivated to turn out, and the turnout just wasn't there across the country.
I saw it coming because you could see it in the polls, and then people are going to be knocking polls tonight, I think. But polls on Missouri showed huge leads for Trump, so I could see it coming. But you talked about looking at a 19-point victory margin. Romney got 9.7, and we thought, whoa, that's quite a victory margin. Hillary even campaigned here, and she still ran her ads. Romney, or should I say Obama, withdrew in 2012, and still Romney was able to get 9.7. Here you have Hillary campaigning, yet Trump runs up a win margin of 19 percentage points. I don't think anyone saw it that quite those numbers coming in.
So what did that do down the rest of the ticket?
Well, there's no question that it affected it, and not only in Missouri, but nationwide. I mean, if you look at what happened in Wisconsin with Feingold way out in front, and all of a sudden, boy, when I heard that come in, I couldn't believe it. I mean, no one was talking about Feingold losing. It was, Johnson was supposed to lose. And the same thing in Pennsylvania with Toomey. Toomey, Trump did so well in Pennsylvania that Toomey was able to rally and win. North Carolina is another case of it. Indiana is another case of it, even though it was pretty obvious that Bai was going to lose by the end. He lost by an enormous margin. And then, of course, it happened in Missouri as well with Blunt holding off. I think Kander, who ran a very, very good race and was actually favored to win at one point, but I just don't, the Trump coattails are too much to overcome.
Was Kander part of that in some sense, in that he was an outsider as well?
Yeah, I mean, Kander ended up losing by only 3 percentage points. He ran stronger by far than any of the other Democrats on the statewide ballot. And part of it was, yeah, while he wasn't embracing Trump's issues at all or his stances, he was he was using the same approach. I'm the outsider, I'm the fresh face, I can go to Washington and change things. I mean, he had different issues, veterans, helping veterans and that sort of thing, and slamming Blunt as being part of the establishment and all that. So that helped him a lot. If the Trump margin had been like even 10, Kander might have been able to eke out a victory.
Did Eric Greitens win the governor's mansion because of the coattails of Donald Trump?
Yes, he did. And here's that strong Republican turnout. It lifted Blunt and it lifted Greitens, and I did not expect Greitens to do so well in rural Missouri. I mean, look at the endorsements that Chris Koster had. He had the farm
NRA.
endorsements, he had the NRA endorsement, and a lot of those things that are usually meaningful there in rural Missouri, and Greitens walked away with it.
I was at the Koster watch party with the Democrats at the Chase. I asked their communications guy, because Mr. Koster was in no mood to talk after that night, if they had underestimated him, and they said no, absolutely not. They couldn't win in this wave, although they did say he ran a very good campaign, meaning Eric Greitens.
Yes, I mean, Greitens did. I would say that Greitens probably ran a better campaign than Koster did, which sort of surprised me. I think Koster needed to have had himself out there in more ads. They were attacking Greitens over whether or not he took too much money from the Mission Continues as charity. And I'm not sure that really stuck that much with voters, that maybe they should have focused more on a lack of experience and some other things. But I got to say, because Koster lost by 6 points. With the Trump wave, he could have done everything perfect, and he probably still would have lost. I mean, Koster ended up losing by about 160,000 votes.
Koster's not used to losing, and by losing by that margin to a person who's not held political office, just a newcomer coming in like that.
He'd never lost an election.
But with the kind of money Greitens has, and I will tell you, I told my friends that Greitens would win. When he won the primary, I wasn't surprised, and that is because when I looked at his resume, I thought he was just perfectly fit for Missouri. I'm talking about the Navy SEAL thing, the gun thing. Kander did well because of it too. It was one of the most famous advertisements in 2016. Was that advertisement with him assembling the gun blindfolded.
So going forward, what does this mean with Greitens in the governor's mansion?
With a Republican legislature.
Well, I think a couple things. One, Greitens has to reach out to the Republican leaders, because a lot of the Republican leaders backed other people for governor. A lot of them are actually privately not that keen on Greitens because his message was similar to Trump's. I'm going to go to Jeff City and clear the swamp and do all this. Well, if you're one of the established legislative leaders, you feel like he's talking about you.
The swamp was all Republicans.
Right.
As your colleague Jason Rosenbaum said.
Yeah. So some of them are a little offended by that. Now, but I think one of the first things they're going to do to kind of show unity, they're going to pass right to work really quick and get it signed into law, because they want to really take action against labor in this state. Their donors, the Republican donors, have been demanding it. That's why they gave them so much money. So I think that you'll see that done within months, if not weeks, as soon as they all get in office in January. And that'll be sort of a show of unity. After that, I'm not sure, because Greitens doesn't know anything about state government, although he acknowledges it. He says he's going to hire a chief operating officer, which became an issue a little bit during the campaign, but Koster never really capitalized on it. But I think the Republican legislators actually will probably have a bigger role in crafting the budget, at least initially, even though that's done by the executive branch, because Greitens that's not something that he's familiar with doing. So it's going to be a shakeout period between them.
I want to go to one thing real quick, just from our last week. Joe, you were here. This is what our panel had to say on the outsider. Justin, this is in the booth there, producer Justin. Let's hear what the panel's perspective was on the outsider, and we'll talk on the other side.
I'm just really surprised by the narrative of the outsider, the career politician, being a demerit, when Koster knows a lot about state government. Teresa Hensley knows a lot about prosecuting cases and running large offices. You've got some really competent people that are being derided as career politicians.
Roy Blunt knows a lot about Washington?
He does. He's a career politician, and that's one of the pluses for me in terms of Blunt's and candor coming up against Blunt. But if you want an accountant, you want a career accountant. If you want a plumber, you want a career plumber. If you want a journalist, you want a career journalist. So career politicians shouldn't be a slam, but they're getting away with doing that in the advertising.
I think it's a slam. I think, the mood in the country right now is that we don't want more career politicians, and the reason for that is because we have not gotten the results that we were promised over and over and over again. And for Republicans in the midterm last time, a lot of huge promises were made. Just give us Congress, just give us the Senate. So the grassroots and a lot of people who do donations, small and large, they delivered, and what they received was nothing. Lots of gridlock, lots of promises broken, and lots of missed and unreturned phone calls and emails, and legislators who spent a lot of time in Washington but weren't available when they were here in the state of Missouri. And that's why the career politician label is a negative. It's something that if you're labeled with it and you can't adequately explain how you've been a good career politician, it's a negative for you.
So clearly the voters went with Stacey Washington's view, not Chris's view there. So what has to get done in Jeff City? Does he have to build some bridges with other Republicans?
Oh yeah, because frankly, many of those Republicans privately, they assumed Coster was going to win. Coster's a former Republican. Most of them knew him. A lot of them would have been more comfortable working with Coster because he was a known quantity. Now they have to get to know this guy who's from their party, but they're not sure what he stands for.
And to draw a parallel in Illinois, before Greitens was in Missouri, Rauner was in Illinois, and he got elected in 2014. He was the outsider, the businessman.
Hadn't held public office.
He had not held public office. Now, he has a Republican governor with a Democratic legislature, but he, in my judgment, he struggles. And we need those political networks to govern when we hold these high offices. And so he doesn't have that. And it's one thing to run against the establishment, but the establishment does get things done.
So how long do they have to do the change that they've promised to do, that clearly people wanted? This is clearly a change election.
Well, I would like to mention Blunt because he was the quintessential insider,
right,
who won, and I think the reason he won is because 83% of incumbent U.S. senators win. When push comes to shove, it's still difficult to knock off an incumbent, and Blunt has a long history in Missouri. He's told me one time he's gone to every single county twice.
3 times now.
3 times now. Because, and he's well known, and it's difficult to knock someone off like that, yet, but Jason Kander almost did it.
Well, I think, when you talk about, as I said, they're going to do right to work right away. And a lot of the public may not be keen on that. I think the public's going to see a lot of action in Congress and a lot of action in Jefferson City. And for some of the public, and this isn't just the ones who didn't vote for him, but some who did. Some of them didn't expect maybe what they're going to see. I mean, because people, especially in rural Missouri, which voted for Trump in we're talking, they had turnouts of 70 to 75%, and 70 to 75% in some of these counties voted for Trump. And they're hoping that he'll do what he says in bringing jobs back, that they'll somehow get that factory back in their little town, which has been gone for 30 years. And some of that is probably almost impossible to fulfill. And so you're going to see within a couple years, if there isn't movement, you're going to see more of this because people are, especially in the rural parts of the country, they're struggling.
So yesterday, my colleague at News Channel 5, KSDK, Rebecca Sheehan, talked to the head of the AFL-CIO about what you just said, potentially some of his members voting against their interest in Missouri when they voted for Eric Greitens. Let's listen to what he had to say to that.
They're mad about their paychecks, they're mad about their jobs going overseas, they're mad about their health care premiums, and in our opinion, right to work is going to make those things worse.
Will it?
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. labor unions have been, very strong political players for a long time, and I think that they have been in the sights of politicians who are not getting those endorsements. I think they've been in the sights of politicians for a long time. This is the opportunity to strike, and they will.
You mentioned polls just a little bit ago, and you have experience polling. What did we miss? What did the polls miss? What did the journalists miss in what people were trying to say or what they said in this election if they were willing to vote for someone who is right to work and they have a union job?
Well, what polls didn't miss was change, and that was the main reason by far for voting for Obama in 2008. And people look for change, and it doesn't happen. A lot of promises are made, and now that was the main reason for voting for Trump this year, and probably for Greitens as well. And people are really naive about that. They vote for these people thinking they're going to get change, and politicians just can't produce that change they want. Joe was mentioning, about bringing back these factories that have gone out of business. It's bringing back the coal industry. These things aren't going to happen, and pollsters have been measuring this kind of thing for a long time. People like to bring in new politicians because they promise change, and then of course the same broken promises are made.
Because our system's set up in a way that change is hard, or the promises are unrealistic?
Well, the promises are unrealistic. I mean, to be fair, because I'm from a small town in Indiana. I saw the same thing happen in my small town 30 years ago. While Reagan was president, that's when a lot of these factories moved overseas because it was more financially lucrative for the corporations, and that's still the case. And I think that, and Trump knows this. He's a businessman, and he's having most of his stuff is made overseas, even though he's promising that he's going to be able to produce these jobs. Now, there may be alternative jobs. He may have some proposals. There's talk about that in Congress, but in Missouri, the same type of thing. Greitens is promising to improve education and promising to really help the economy, but he's not being specific. And because in many ways, the Republicans believe that right to work, which basically will lower wages, but they think it will bring jobs, they may try to push for more tax cuts, although the state's somewhat strapped, and they may not put as much money in education as they say, even though they want to. But they're hoping somehow to turn the tide, and it's tough. You look at Kansas; they're in a terrible shape over this. So this is going to be, people want change, but Jeff City's going to be under pressure to deliver.
Let's go to a tweet we saw this week from Real Big Soul. I'm concerned that St. Louis and Kansas City will be completely abandoned by GOP office holders. True or false? They have all three, or both chambers and the governor's office. True?
I think in the legislature, yes.
Yes.
Now, Greitens is from St. Louis, so he doesn't play that up.
Our first St. Louis governor in a long time, right?
Yes.
Like 100 years or something.
Yes, he was masterful at not emphasizing that. So he he grew up here. He went to school in St. Louis County. So I'm sure he's interested in helping the region, but whether or not he's going to be able to get partners in this General Assembly, I'll be surprised. As far as Republicans, the Democrats may try to work with them, but they're in such small numbers, it may be difficult.
There's so much support in outstate anymore that politicians can get away with ignoring the city, and the cities aren't flexing their political muscle.
There's a lot of talk about whether, depending on your perspective politically, you may agree with this or not, but that the election of Donald Trump signals it was an election of intolerance. However, Missouri just elected its first ever Jewish governor. Does that say anything, or is that, it wasn't an issue in the campaign, and I'm not saying it should have been by any means, but does that say anything about us? We've moved on. We don't care.
Well, nobody really brought it up.
Yes. There's only been 3 Jewish candidates ever elected in Missouri, and going back to 1824, there's only been 3 successful Jewish candidates. Harriet Woods was one, and she didn't have a Jewish name at all. Kenny Rothman was one who had a Jewish name and was elected statewide. But polls do show that there's still prejudices against Jewish people, women, for one. That's probably a hindrance for Hillary, by the way. The Gallup has been asking this question for a long time. If your party were to nominate a person, the person happened to be blank, black, Jewish, a woman, gay, an atheist, and they measure the extent of prejudice toward that kind of candidate, and being Jewish is a handicap. I remember talking to Jake Zimmerman about it. He said, of course, it'd be better not to be Jewish, and he had a very Jewish name. So, you know, bigotry is not good, but in electoral behavior studies, it's measured to be a reality.
Let's talk about some of the amendments that passed. We said on the program last week that voter ID would likely pass. It did. Now what happens? I think we got some clarification today that this will not affect the mayor's race in St. Louis. Well, they won't be up and running
Kicks
by
in
then.
June.
Right.
Kicks in June. Where do we go for voter ID?
Well, there's going to be two things. One, there will likely be a court challenge, but it'll be in federal court, not in state court, since this was a constitutional amendment change on the state level. So some voting rights advocates are already preparing to go to court, federal court, to try to challenge it, pointing to provisions in particular that they say pattern what was in North Carolina, some of which got struck down. So you'll have that. That may slow things down a little bit. Second, this constitutional amendment that passed is contingent on a bill that was passed last session, overridden over the Governor Jay Nixon's veto, which stipulates how it would be implemented, but it also says that the money must be allocated to pay for birth certificates. I mean, they're estimating it's going to be $17 million initially, and it may be a couple million a year to keep going. And the constitutional amendment makes clear it only goes into effect if the money is spent. So the General Assembly has to allocate the money. So when they're looking at all this other stuff, I said, maybe other tax cuts or whatever, this could get caught up in the mix. It's going to be fascinating to see how they do this.
Also passing very easily was the Amendment 2, if I'm not mistaken, by a wide margin. That was a campaign finance reform. Where do we go from there? When does that kick in? When do we see effects of that? Or does that go to court?
I saw that as being kind of a feel-good moment for Missouri. It was sort of like Democrats and Republicans both agreed, we've got to start somewhere, and this certainly isn't perfect, but it's a start for a state that has nothing. And this sort of seemed to be the good government presence there. I was happy with that.
But it'll go to court as well.
Yeah, we'll go to court, and what's intriguing is, see, Greitens did not support this.
On principle that it was not well written and it would end up in court anyway? Or you
Well,
think
no.
right?
Just because the general thing, he said he thought it was a free speech issue. Now, Koster supported it.
Which he got a lot of free speech if that's what it was in this election. He and Mr. Koster.
Yeah, but Greitens in particular. See, 90% of Greitens' money for the general election came from one group, the Republican Governors Association, which obviously got donors who then gave to him. And the Republican Governors Association donations we won't be able to find out where they got their money until next year, because they only have to report to the IRS ever so often. So my point being is that it's unclear like how much Greitens is going to advocate for it or whatever, because it probably will be caught up in court for a while.
And they have a hard time surviving. Historically, they do. I mean, this goes way back to Buckley versus Valeo on a national level. They just simply have a hard time surviving First Amendment challenges.
But this was such a strong vote, though. Don't you think that even if it does get struck down, there will be some pressure on the legislature to do some kind of a replacement, to do something to step in this direction?
I don't think so.
Well, I think some
The
of
pressure,
them,
but that may not be the result.
Well, because I think, see, a lot of legislators, okay, there's like 2 or 3 people in this state who provide huge donations, okay? And they're mainly Republicans. And I've talked to some state senators who have said on the record in the last 6 months or so that their vote in 2008 to get rid of it is the one vote they regret, because they didn't expect their rival for whatever office they were running for to get all this money from one phone call. So I think that there may be some pressure in the General Assembly. Now, the way this is written is that if some things get tossed out, the other parts can stay. So some of it may survive. And we're one of the few states without donation limits. So it may survive, but I think there'll be turmoil for the next 6 months or a year. or
Something,
two.
a race nobody talked about before, nobody's really talking about after, Ann Wagner, but Andy, you say there may be a story there.
You know, looking at the returns in Missouri, Ann Wagner had the lowest margin of victory in the Republican delegation from Missouri, and with the exception of Emmanuel Cleaver, the lowest in the state. So she has never carried her district at the level that Todd Aiken did, even though it's been redrawn since then. But her numbers are just going down.
So what does
Just
that tell you?
ticking
What does
down.
that mean?
And the Democrat has actually, Bill Otto got 38%. No challenger in the 2nd District has done that in the last decade.
But it
So-
is a more diverse district than some of the rural districts where you expect a Republican to really do very, very
Just
well.
tell you about
she's
her
taking-
political, what were her,
I
did she have
wonder-
political aspirations beyond that 2nd district?
Yes, I think two things. She has been widely assumed to be looking to run for the U.S. Senate in 2018 against Claire McCaskill. But Ann Wagner, who also was a former chairman of the state party and a former co-chair of the national RNC, she got caught up in this Trump business. She had not been a supporter of Trump. Well, frankly, none of the Republican leaders in the state had been a supporter of Trump. They backed other people. She finally came on board right around the time of Cleveland, as did most everybody else. Well, then after that video came out about a month ago that people thought sealed his defeat, where he said those things about women, she unendorsed him. Then she took heat the last few weeks, and then she came out, went on the radio and said, well, just because I'm still going to vote for him, I still want people to vote for him. So she was trying to kind of maneuver, and I had heard from a number of Republicans that the rank and file was furious with her because the rank and file liked Trump. So some of them were voting for Otto as a protest vote. So I think that if she decides that she wants to run for the U.S. Senate, she probably has to do some mea culpas first, private.
We'll have to leave it there because we're out of time. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate your time, all of you. I should have given you